We're joined by Congressman Trent Kelly here on SuperTalk, Mississippi. Congressman, it's great to have you on, sir.
Good morning, Scott. Always great to be on SuperTalk.
We have been talking this hour about Israel's strike against Iran and whether or not the U.S. is going to get involved. As a member of the House Armed Services Committee, what intelligence are you able to share on Iran's development of a nuclear weapon, on their enrichment of uranium? Is this a threat to the U.S. and Israel as Bibi Netanyahu is claiming?
Well, I can't get into a whole lot of that, but I just will say Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. I think we've seen the enrichment and the enrichment sites. Obviously, we have international folks looking at that. They continue to get closer and closer. We had a failed deal with Obama that got us no closer to doing anything and took away the sanctions, which were very effective. And so, yes, Iran is a threat not only to Israel, but to the region and to the world, and they cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon.
Should the U.S. get involved? Should we use the bunker buster, the MOPs, on the Fort Al nuclear enrichment facility?
I think we need to wait. I think President Trump is showing a very measured approach, regardless of what the mainstream media wants to print. He's taking his time. He's considering. I had a briefing on this Monday. I think he's considering all his options. I think he's looking at what's going to be effective and what is not. He's consulting and counseling with the Armed Services Committee, with the Intelligence Committee. So I think it's a measured approach. I think the number one starter is Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. And so I think he's seeing, can Israel finish this on their own? What are the U.S. interests in this? And what is the fallout if we do strike Iran? So I think it's still yet to be seen. I think at the bottom line is I think sanctions and some other things will work. I think there needs to be an international outcry because Iran has been an international supporter of terror. They have done strikes all around the world through their proxies, and so they cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. So I think we just need to play it by ear, sit back, be patient, but we can't wait too late.
I think the threat of getting involved could be enough to bring Iran to the table, but they haven't exactly negotiated in good faith over the years anyway, perhaps because the president and the negotiating team that was in place wasn't a strong negotiator, as Donald Trump has been. So that may make a remarkable difference, but we've seen how difficult it's become to negotiate with North Korea after they've developed a nuclear weapon.
Yes. Listen, these dictators care about one thing, and that is staying in power and suppressing the people to stay in power by any means possible. You've got an 80-something-year-old man who is the Ayatollah there, who is past the normal life expectancy for most people in that region. And so he will do everything he needs to do to try to hold on to power. But I do think there's room for negotiation. But in that region especially, the president is giving him an option to save face. If he chooses not to do that, then we'll have to consider all the options that are available to the United States.
There's been some speculation and some talk in mainstream media about invoking the War Powers Act if the president chooses to act. Is that a requirement? Can you explain for everyone the War Powers Act and when that should be used?
Well, the president, to defend the homeland or to defend the nation, can at any time initiate contacts prior to the approval of Congress. I don't ever think that's a good idea. But, however, what it allows to do is rather than having to wait on 435 of us in the House and 100 in the Senate to take their time to declare war, it allows them to respond to immediate and pressing threats to the safety and security of the United States. So, yes, I think it's good. I would hope that if the president has time, of course, we're dealing in days and weeks and months, and so we don't know what those timelines are. They're very vague. So the president has the right to respond, but I would hope that he would consult with Congress. But if the need presents itself and he doesn't have time, then hopefully Congress would follow suit and not allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon.
I'm one of these guys that believes we give a lot, we give too much foreign aid to a lot of countries. Israel is a nation that received, I believe, about $15 billion in the last budget year for military aid. Has that been used effectively? Is the solution to just give them more resources, more money, more military support, and let them finish the job on their own?
Well, I think there's a combination. You have to be, there's some Lend-Lease stuff we did in World War II where we gave crews and equipment. We leased those to Britain, and in China and other places in World War II. I think there's other options available, but I do not think we need to get an engagement as the United States unless absolutely necessary and required. I mean, first of all, our safety and security as a nation is most important, but we can't go back to what we just did with endless wars and endless deployments. If we do it, it needs to be quick, it needs to be surgical, and it needs to be over and not a prolonged and protracted event.
You served in the National Guard. How concerned are you for our troops serving in bases like Qatar and some of the other bases in the Middle East within striking distance of Iran if their proxies like the Houthis or Hezbollah decided to escalate attacks on U.S. bases in the Middle East?
Well, I think they would make a grave mistake to attack U.S. interests and U.S. troops anywhere in the world. They've done that before. They've made attempts to do that before, but they need to understand if you strike United States troops and United States bases, there will be consequences. What they are, they may be economic, they may be military strikes, lots of other things. But I'm very concerned. That's why I think it's important to get them to the negotiation table, which President Trump is trying to do. But if they take us not striking them as a measure of weakness, they would very misunderstand what we're doing. We're trying to show a measured approach and not have bloodshed. But if they choose to strike U.S. troops, especially if they hurt or injure or kill any of our troops, it's a different ball game.
We're talking to Congressman Trent Kelly here on SuperTalk Mississippi. I'm Scott Sands. Shifting gears, Congressman, there's been a delay in the Senate, as expected, over the big, beautiful bill. Some controversial provisions related to SALT, the state and local tax deductions, as well as no tax on tips, no tax on overtimes, may be changed by the Senate before it comes back to the House. Are you concerned about the changes? Will this bill get done by July 4th?
I think it'll get done. And yes, I mean, I'm not a SALT. I'm not one who supports SALT because that benefits California, New York, all those places which have high state and local taxes. That does not apply here in Mississippi. But that being said, we cannot afford to stymie the economy. We cannot afford to have a 38% tax increase on middle-class America. So we'll get this thing done. The Senate needs to do what they're going to do. You know, it may be one of those things where we have a little more SALT and local taxes than I like. But that being said, it would be devastating to our economy, to our small businesses, to do away and not make permanent these tax cuts. So I think that's the most important thing, and I think people have to keep that in their vision. So I plan on supporting this in whatever form, as long as it maintains and makes permanent those tax cuts to the American people, especially to our middle class and small businesses.
Senator Rand Paul wants to see the debt ceiling taken out of the big, beautiful bill and voted on separately. I mean, it is hard to look at our national debt and our deficit and not agree to a certain extent with Rand Paul. And you're absolutely right. We've got to make sure that the tax cuts are made permanent. There are so many important economic provisions in the big, beautiful bill. But over the debt ceiling and over some of the spending cuts that we haven't seen happen yet, would you like to see those aspects separated when it comes back to the House? And why do we continue to raise the debt ceiling? What makes that so important?
Well, first of all, I agree with the president. We shouldn't have a debt ceiling. We're going to pay our bills. So all it is another opportunity for either party to cry emergency, and we've got to raise the debt ceiling or we're going to default on our bill. We're not going to default on our bills as the United States.
No, we always raise the debt ceiling.
What that does is that creates more waste because people always want to use something as leverage. I want this in order to do this. So I think we need to do away with the debt ceiling. I think we need to work extremely hard on cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. I think we need to cut our spending habits, but I think we need to take away the debt ceiling, because that is just another opportunity for folks to get local interests or local things that cost a lot of money to all our taxpayers. So the debt ceiling is an artificial barrier that is never going to be broken. We're going to continue to do that. What we've got to do is stop spending, not worry about the debt ceiling.
You're absolutely. Every time the debt ceiling comes up for debate, it always gets raised, and there are always added provisions added to the debt ceiling increases. But at the same time, we've got to cut spending so that debt doesn't continue to grow. And I think many of us are becoming frustrated that we're not seeing these cuts happen faster. Congressman, we're out of time, but I do appreciate you joining us this morning.
Thank you very much, and you have a great day, Scott.
Congressman Trent Kelly here on Super Talk Mississippi. This is Mornings with Richard Cross. Scott Sands filling in. The C Spire text line is open too at 601-879-4395.